Good morning. We are here to announce the California Homeowner Bill of Rights. And I want to start by applauding the leadership of the Speaker, Perez, and Senate Pro Tem Steinberg. This has been a journey, and we are only, I think we've only not even halfway through. These are the beginning steps. But I have to say, in front of my colleagues, members of the Senate and Assembly, that you all have been incredibly supportive and real leaders to our effort to bring relief to California homeowners. And throughout the process, many of you know that was a 13-month process in terms of the settlement discussions with the banks. My colleagues standing behind me were standing behind us the entire way. And so I want to just thank you all for that. So today what we are doing is essentially announcing the next step in the many steps that are necessary to bring justice to California and to California homeowners. So we announced a couple of weeks ago a settlement where we returned and brought back to California $18 billion from the 5 largest banks in the country. And we were able to accomplish that in a way that is going to provide meaningful relief, but in a way that also did not give a blank check of immunity to the banks for their misconduct. We did that while preserving our ability to investigate conduct that has not been investigated, to ensure that there will be consequence and accountability for conduct that has harmed California in a very significant way. As many of you know, we have had the distinction in our country of having at one time 9, now 7, of the top 10 cities in this country hardest hit by the foreclosure crisis. In fact, we've been battling with Nevada for the #1 place on that list, Stockton or Las Vegas. So it's a real issue, and it's an issue that impacts families and communities as varied as Boyle Heights to Stockton and Los Baños and many other places. And the families who are impacted are people who really have done everything we should expect of law-abiding, good people. They are people who have worked hard, who have believed in the American dream. They went out and bought a home like they were supposed to as evidence of all of their hard work, as a place that would provide shelter for their families, something that represented for them their ability to pay for their children's college tuition and have a retirement that would allow them to live with dignity. And we have homes up and down this state that have been, in the last couple of years, in the process of foreclosure. We expect that the pipeline currently in California for foreclosure is that we have about 500,000 homes currently in that process. We have had the distinction of having approximately 2 million homes, mortgages that were underwater. So it's a real issue. And as we have been traveling the state then, we've been talking with these homeowners, with these families, with these Californians. And they express a number of concerns and frustrations around a system that has not been fair. So what we are announcing today in this California Homeowner Bill of Rights is the ability to correct the course and to provide them with a system where the rules are clear, where everyone gets a fair shot, and where everyone has equal standing around this issue. Specifically, what we are doing is we are proposing 6 bills. And as you can see, it is a function of the collaboration of both of our houses in the legislature, with a commitment that spans, again, various counties that range from urban to suburban to rural and agricultural, that range from red to blue to purple. And the first bill we are referring to as the Foreclosure Reduction Act. What it will do, this bill, is essentially give homeowners basic standards of fairness. And most specifically, it will address the dual track issue. The dual track issue, many homeowners will tell you, is an absolutely insidious process. Because essentially what happens is that the homeowner who is in the process of being foreclosed upon oftentimes will borrow money from friends and family, tens of thousands of dollars, to try and modify their loan so they can stay in their home. So they're in the foreclosure process and the modification process, dual track, 2 tracks. These 2 tracks are not talking with each other. And in fact, what they're receiving, these homeowners who are trying to stay in their home, and by the way, let's be clear, trying to pay to stay in their home. They're not looking for handouts. What they're finding is that when in this dual track, they are not getting consistent information from the banks. They can't find anyone who can tell them exactly what's going on, but they believe by being in the process of modification that if they pay on the modified rate, they can stay in their home. Invariably, we've met countless people who, in that process, working in good faith, find that someone's knocking on their door saying, your house is about to be sold. I met one young man who then the next day, someone else knocked on his door and told him his home had been sold on the front steps of the courthouse. So this first bill, the Foreclosure Reduction Act, will deal with that and address that issue. And essentially, it will require creditors to establish the right of foreclosure. So they're going to have to establish that they actually have a right to foreclose on that home. And we're going to require that they provide the homeowner with notice of the various stages of default, sale, so that they, the homeowner, will have some understanding of what is happening with the roof over their head. This reform will also, by the way, and all of these reforms are meaningful for a number of reasons, including, most importantly, that they reflect, in large part, the terms that were negotiated through the national settlement. But what's very important to know is the national settlement spans a course of 3 years only. So that would not be permanent reform. What we are doing is taking the best of that settlement, bringing it to California, but doing it in a way that will have lasting impact and will be on our books and change the course so that this does not happen again. The second bill we are calling the Homeowner Due Process Rights Act. And essentially, it will give homeowners transparency in the process. And most significantly, it will give them a single point of contact. These homeowners, during the course of this process, end up talking to various people, and each time they talk with someone, it is someone different than who they talked with before, after they have shared all of their circumstances, after they've poured out their hearts. So what we want to do is make it easier for the homeowner to go through the process by just having a single point of contact. It's reasonable, it's fair. It will also create penalties that have not existed for the robo-signing activity. And we know what that was. Essentially, it was rubber stamping foreclosures without doing the due diligence to determine whether the homeowner, in fact, should be foreclosed upon. What this bill will do is create a penalty and hopefully, therefore, a deterrent to robo-signing activity. But it will fine any robo-signing practice $10,000 per loan. The third bill we are calling the Blight Prevention Act. And essentially, it will allow and empower communities to tackle one of the biggest challenges they're facing around abandoned homes. You go to Stockton, the police chief there told me that in the first 6 months of the year, last year, they had over 200 reports of crimes occurring in abandoned properties that ranged from homicide to rape. Blight is an issue that impacts not just the immediate neighbors of that home, but whole communities. So what we will do with this act is essentially create fines for owners of blighted properties, but we will also give new owners who buy those homes an extended period of time, instead of 30 days, 60 days, to resolve the health and safety issues that surround that blighted home, and in that way create incentives for them to improve the situation and the status of those homes. The fourth bill is the Tenants Protection Act. Very important. Although we often on this issue of foreclosures talk about and think of the homeowners, there are many who are tenants who are actually paying rent to live in those homes, and then the home is foreclosed upon, and of course the tenant is being evicted and ends up being on the streets. What this will do is pause any possible eviction of that tenant who is living in that foreclosed home, so that they will have, instead of 60 days, which is California law, 90 days after the foreclosure to be able to get their lives in order and figure out their next steps. And it will guarantee that the renter's lease will be honored in that process. The fifth bill, we are calling the Enhanced Attorney General Enforcement Bill. And essentially what we will do is this. We will create a new fund in the California Treasury by levying a $25 fee on the banks, on the servicers, each time they record a notice of default. And that fund will then be the resource in which we will tap to do the work that needs to happen around everything we have discussed, from going over and going after foreclosure scams and scam artists, those predators who are lawyers and brokers who are preying on these homeowners, to what we are doing in terms of the national work we are doing around addressing the misconduct and suspected misconduct by the servicers and Freddie and Fannie. The sixth and final bill we're calling a grand jury for California financial crimes. So obviously, when we are talking about this issue, we know that it ranges from Del Norte County to Imperial County. It impacts our entire state. And often we are finding that the bad actors, be they the subject of a criminal investigation or a concern about consumer fraud or corporate fraud, they're working across jurisdictional lines. They're not confining their activity to any one county. So it makes it difficult for us as law enforcement to address the issue if we're expecting that each DA, for example, in each county will just deal with the issue and handle it there. So we need the ability and the tools, as the California Department of Justice, to be able to go after this issue across jurisdictional lines. So we are creating the tool through this bill that will allow us to convene a grand jury to go after bad conduct that crosses jurisdictional lines. This is essential and integral to being able to make sure that there will be consequence and accountability. And most importantly, this grand jury will be for the purpose of going after crimes against the state, crimes against the public fisc. And so there you have it. And I'm going to leave it. I'm going to now pass the mic over to our great Assembly Speaker, John Perez, who, again, I can't emphasize enough, has been such a friend and such a leader on this issue, and who has demonstrated great courage to take it on in his role of leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney General. I am pleased to join the Attorney General and the Senate President Pro Tem to discuss the important developments that we've seen in the area of foreclosure settlement, and quite frankly, in laying the foundation for the next key steps. I want to congratulate the Attorney General on the victory that she had on behalf of the people of California, clearly, but in changing the dialogue nationally and making sure that the settlement that moved forward was in the best interest in consumers across the country. She used her leadership here in California not only to advocate for our consumers, but really to change and make stronger the settlement for consumers across the country, and to add the kind of stability and predictability that we need as we move forward in dealing with these issues. We know that our state has suffered greatly as the results of bad actors in the banking and financial industries areas. And it's clear that we have much more work to do before we completely resolve the issues affecting the housing industry in California. And we know that far too many families are still facing the threat of foreclosure. My colleagues and I, under the leadership of the Pro Tem and myself, will continue to work with the Governor and the Attorney General and our counterparts to put forward the kinds of policies that you've just heard about. Now, if you see behind us, these are authors of different pieces of the legislation who've been actively engaged in the questions revolving foreclosure and housing stability. Assemblymember Mike Davis, Senator Fran Pavley, Assemblyman Mike Feuer, Senator Mark Leno, Senator Lonnie Hancock, Assemblywoman Wilmer Amina Carter, Assemblyman Mike Yang, Assemblywoman Holly Mitchell, and Assemblywoman Nancy Skinner. Each of them are playing an active role in moving forward elements of the overall Homeowners Bill of Rights that the Attorney General just outlined. But each of them has been engaged more broadly in this issue and will continue to demonstrate the type of leadership that is needed for consumers in the state of California and, quite frankly, for our economy to recover as we continue to stabilize this. With that, it is clear that this is an effort that requires the leadership of each of these authors, the leadership and tremendous success that our Attorney General has demonstrated, and the leadership of our Senate President Pro Tem, Darrell Steinberg. With that, I'd like to ask him to take over the microphone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's great and important that this be a bicameral effort, and I hope in the end a bipartisan effort to provide relief to tens of thousands of Californians who desperately need it. I also want to thank, of course, the Attorney General and echo the Speaker's comments. To go from the original version of the national settlement to what California ended up with, billions of dollars more of relief for distressed homeowners, is due to the persistence and tenacity of our Attorney General. And, she could have just said, well, that's enough for now, move on to another issue. Instead, we're here today because she recognizes that as profound as that settlement is, that there's still more work to do. And that's why we are here today and why I'm very happy to stand with you and to stand with my colleagues. I want to thank the members as well, with a special shout out to Senator Mark Leno, who has championed the dual tracking issue for a long, long time. And its day has come. And I'm very excited about working on this. Look, if there was ever a meat and potatoes middle class issue, if there ever was a crisis putting innocent, hardworking people into dire circumstances, this is it. The practice of expediency by too many in the mortgage lending industry are at the root of the pain for millions of California families, and it has to end. These shouldn't be complicated issues. These are questions of basic fairness to stop hurting innocent consumers. If you're upside down on your mortgage and you're making a good faith effort by going through loan modification, the banks and the lenders shouldn't be allowed to commence foreclosure proceedings at the same time. It's common sense, it's dual tracking, and it has to stop. If you're fighting to keep your home, the bank employees shouldn't be allowed to forge signatures on sign-off on foreclosures without verifying the information for the sake of expediency. That's called robo-signing, and it too has to stop. If you're a renter who happens to be caught in the middle when a lender forecloses on your landlord, you shouldn't be booted out after only 60 days. That lender should not be allowed to ignore the lease. It takes away basic protection for tenants, and it has to stop. And if you're trying to settle problems with your loan, you shouldn't be shuffled from one bank officer to another when all you're trying to do, how stressful this is, right? All you're trying to do is get basic information about your account and the status of your mortgage. That's frustrating, it's unnecessary, and it has to stop. For consumers, this is much more than just dealing with a few minor bumps in the road of balancing their family budget. Home serves as the center of family life. Home ownership is the core of how we define financial security as well. And so the Attorney General, again, has done incredible work in putting out a template for what ought to apply to all mortgage lenders, all banks, and provide protection for all consumers who find themselves in this most unfortunate situation. And with so many other issues that we deal with here, it's not just about protecting the consumers, that's paramount, innocent people, but it's also about economic recovery. What good is it for California that tens of thousands of people, more people, have to go through this? What's the good for California that we have thousands of blighted properties in neighborhoods going unoccupied? This is part of economic recovery. We need to be aggressive. We need to be fair. We're going to have to negotiate. There's no question about it. The legislature there's never an easy straight line to get to goal. We know that. But the time is now, and with the backing of the state's top law enforcement officer, with the work she has done over the last several months, this is the year. Thank you.